Welcome back, Red Spotters. We're back here with another recap of the Disney Plus Marvel series Moon Knight here on Red Spotlight. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, joined by David Francisco. Once again at it. Last week we discussed the 4th episode, and this week we're discussing episode 5, titled Asylum. Again, we give off our initial impressions about how the episode went and what we thought of it, and then we get into a full breakdown of all the episode as it happened in sequence. That is our show today here on Red Spotlight number 389. David, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
That's good. Good to hear. So, yeah, we've been recapping Moon Knight now for a couple of weeks, and we're kind of already at the end. All again. Which I have to say is kind of annoying because I'm really, really enjoying it, and I don't want to stop enjoying things. So I hate it when we get to this point. As far as our recaps are concerned, but then also, of course, because more importantly, this show is concerned. So, I guess we'll just go ahead and jump right into it, because this was quite the episode. I will say something here. I'm not sure how surprising it'll be considering the, the story that we're going to be talking about here, and especially with how it's been received. Like, I was curious to see what the reaction would be like on Twitter, and almost immediately I've seen people sing, its praises in ways that, quite frankly, they've not extended to this series quite so far. And as a brief aside, I really have to say, I think the fact that the Marvel shows, for however many issues they've had, and we've had many issues with all of them, that doesn't make it like it. I don't think it ultimately means that they're troubled or bad. It just means that, a lot of good shows have a couple of problems that held it back from being great. That's the usual story here. But with all of that, there were still moments of greatness in a lot of them. But I think, and this is where I'm saying it's a brief aside, it really does show you how slavish and ridiculous the love for the Mandalorian is. I'm sorry I'm bringing it back to that, because this is how it is. Or with anything related to the Star Wars Disney Plus realm, any episode, every episode, when it drops, not only are far more people watching it, but again, as we were bitching about in the earlier part of the year, back in January, February, all they have to do is sneeze or fart, and it's like, oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever seen. All the time. Any little thing, it's like, wow, this episode was phenomenal. And then we're like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's consistently bad and boring. We can't even say it's good. Maybe some aspects of it can be good, but it sure as hell isn't the writing, which is what is, usually praised. So when I compare that to the reactions that these show, also again on the same streaming service, get, and I'm like, it's pretty reserved in comparison. Mm-hmm. And the irony is, I would be far more understanding if it were, of course, the Disney Plus shows that would get this praise, because legitimately, I do think that in some spots, they are deserving of some wonderful praise, like we're about to get into it this week. All of which is to say, I am someone that, I've been saying this every single week, I wasn't at all excited for Moon Knight because I wasn't at all excited for anything in the Marvel Universe this year, not named Thor Love and Thunder, or if it has James Gunn's name attached to it. I've really gone on this rant, I don't know how many times, about how when it comes to the cookie cutter, generic, same old Marvel Studios storytelling, I am fed up with it. I've said it thousands of times already. However, week after week after week now. We're now 5 weeks in a row. Can you believe it? Shit, 5 weeks. Oh my God, 5 weeks. I have gone on here and I've said, you know what? Not only was that a good episode, I really enjoyed that. And my enjoyment for this series has continued to build and build and build with every passing week. And I'm not going to lie, part of why I feel so enthusiastic about the series is, in no small part, because of how much they have gone out of their way to not feel as if they have to, tell us every 5 seconds, by the way, did you guys know sitting at home watching our show that we're in the MCU? Aren't you glad that you get to watch us to see how we affect the MCU? Instead, we have a show that kind of completely sidesteps it, if not altogether ignores it, with some exceptions. Like this, there was a shout out to something else in the MCU. Very minor, of course, but if you know it, you would have caught it. But had the audacity to say, you know what? Why don't we focus on our characters? Why don't we tell a story that has some meaning and depth, and we dispense with the whole parade of endless cameos or references or what, this means for some other project in the MCU. Instead, why don't we just tell a story that will connect with people at the end of the day? And I think, while I wouldn't say we're reaching the level of phenomenal amazing as far as all 5 of these episodes together, I think this is kind of a testament to what you can do when you don't let, a cinematic universe suffocate you into just being another, installment of a cinematic universe. And one of the things I did want to address, and I shared this with you, I think it was about yesterday. This was an article from the Direct when it comes to the people behind this show. So, and this is the headline: Moon Knight director explains why the show is avoiding MCU connections. In an interview with Digital Spy, prior to the official premiere of the Disney Plus show Moon Knight, director Aaron Moorhead talked about how they chose for the series to be relatively unconnected to the wider MCU. This is what he said: making sure that Moon Knight was something that could completely stand alone as a character was one of the foundations of doing this entire project. Our executive producer, Grant Curtis, and also Mohammed Daib, the other director and EP, they were all saying, there's no reason to do this if we're not going to be able to be bold by spending all the currency of having a character that no one knows anything about. And it doesn't have to tie in any way. There's no expectations on him. So we do anything that we want. And that was actually one of the reasons that Justin and I really wanted to do this project, is that he could be anything. The project could be anything. And then I do want to say, and I do want to, make a distinction here and separate, the groups here from the usual MCU stans that watch these shows. There are, of course, comic book fans of Moon Knight. And I do want to say, there is something to be said if you are a diehard Moon Knight comic book fan, and if you're continuously disappointed in this show because clearly they're taking either a different direction or they're making very different choices than you would have anticipated, I can always understand and sympathize with fans being disappointed when something is translated and not being how it was. But I will say, where I've always differed with comic fans, or even fans of novels that get made into movies, this is why it's an adaptation, to do a different retelling of the story. And I think it is quite bold, honestly. And I don't say that a lot about a lot of Marvel stuff. But in this regard, it is pretty bold that we have 5 out of 6 episodes, and we've barely seen the Moon Knight costume. I mean, and it's honestly, to me, it's not something that I'm constantly thinking about. And I'll say, because the show has done such a good job of making me like and feel invested in the narrative, but then also the characters. Steven, Mark, Layla, even Harrow. That I'm not even thinking about until it's pointed out to me, hey, we're 5 episodes out of 6 in, and we've barely seen much of Moon Knight fighting. And I kind of love that, because that just goes to show action and fighting sequences. By the way, they're going to come next week. It's the finale. I mean, I don't know what you think is going to happen, but obviously that's going to happen next week. It is a Marvel show, and it always goes back to that, which could be a red flag. So we'll put a pin in that. But still, it does not at all feel as if action was a priority on this show. And thank you. Look, let's be real. David and I, we haven't really been big fans of the action for the most part, so it's not something that we're missing. But maybe they'll deliver something next week. Who knows? But again, I wasn't watching this for an action show. But if you were somebody who was expecting there to be wall-to-wall action, I can understand you being disappointed. I'm not one of those people, so I'm not. And I'm actually quite thankful that they were focused on telling an interesting story instead of using the story as a background object for a fancy or poorly done, shall we say, action sequence. So that's something that I wanted to bring up right now. A couple of things as we head into this particular episode. Now, those are all really wonderful things I've been saying about the series. And again, I know I haven't gotten into this episode yet, but I'll get there, I promise. But I think they're all kind of precursors to kind of lay the groundwork for a lot that happens in this episode. The big con, though, that I think continues to be a problem for every single Disney Plus show, with perhaps, and I say perhaps, because I'm not entirely sure, the exception of WandaVision. And it's something that I've made no secret about and have been bitching about for weeks. The episode count. There is a problem, and this is the same pattern with all of them. WandaVision, Falcon, Hawkeye, Loki, and now Moon Knight. Where we get to the end of the 5th of ultimately 6 total episodes. We get to the end of the penultimate episode, and everyone, without fail, is asking themselves, oh my God, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot of moving parts. How can they tie everything up with just one more episode in a satisfying way? Those were great questions to ask, but it's a problem when we're asking the same questions in every single show. In every single show's penultimate episode, we're left wondering, how can you possibly put all of this in a nice conclusion with just one more episode? And guess what? The answer, 10 times out of 10, has been, they didn't. They didn't wrap it all up satisfyingly. And if we're going to look back at the episodes and the quality of all of the finales of the shows, with, of course, understanding that some were better than others, it's pretty clear, David, that they all kind of had some of the same problems. Again, the execution varies, but inherently, there are issues with all of them, where it kind of feels as if we're at the last hour and now we gotta just quickly wrap things up, and it's just a whole bunch of random action set pieces that kind of work, again, some better than others, but ultimately we're just left with, man, it felt so rushed. That wasn't anywhere near as satisfying as it could have been. They really fumbled the ball there at the very end. And I can't help but feel that part of the problem, obviously, of course, part of the problem is, well, Marvel just goes back to being Marvel, sure, but at the end of the day, I feel I'm pretty convinced part of the problem, there's not enough episodes. And I think it may not sound to people listening that there's a big difference between 6 episodes and 8 episodes. But when you see shows like Peacemaker, or when you see shows like Stranger Things, or even WandaVision, which had 3 more episodes than 6, you can feel the difference between that. So, given the track record, I'm nervous about what's going to happen next week. So all that is a precursor. So what happened this week? Again, and David, I know that was a long preamble. You're going to have your time to respond to all of that if you so choose. Or I guess if you want, you can respond to it now. And then we can get to the episode. That was a lot I just threw at you.
Yeah.
I know I threw a lot at you, but all of that was really just to say that as far as this episode is concerned, I kind of loved it. Like, I think this is actually pretty fucking great. I was surprisingly moved, as the episode transpired. The takeaways are that in 5 episodes, they've managed to make me care so much, honestly, about everybody here. And it was great to have an episode. I mean, I love the concept of this episode. We're going to have here Mark and Steven go in their inner psyche and go into their past. And obviously, this is being billed as the episode that gives you all the answers. And a lot of the questions that you and I have had about what exactly is the situation here with Mark and Steven, it was pretty much addressed in a pretty great execution, I would say. Oscar Isaac, wonderful, wonderful performance. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, because the Disney Plus shows get so much views, and because the Emmys are kind of, shall we say, hacks, and they just, chase what's popular. It's actually pretty easy to predict that Oscar Isaac will get a nomination from this show, just based on past precedents. And I honestly would not be upset because of it, because I think this is actually one of the better performances in the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, quite easily. Like, Oscar Isaac is really, really giving it his all in this performance, and I honestly fucking love it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if the same could be said for Ethan Hawke, who is kind of everywhere right now, and his Harrow is wonderful as well. Again, this is always where I start off with, but it's actually, it just continues to build and build into a higher caliber, I'd say, every single week. Definitely some surprises, twists and turns here. I don't know what more I can say without getting into all of the spoilers, which we will. But yeah, quite emotional. And I have to say, I think this is easily the best episode the Marvel Cinematic Universe has produced on the Disney Plus realm. Right next to or right underneath, shall we say, the penultimate episode of WandaVision. And there are some similarities between the 2 episodes and how they are designed and what they are designed to do and be for that season. But the performances deliver. The writing is quite good. And I think, the level of emotion that we have here reaches a level that the films quite frequently miss, if they at all bother or attempt to even go for any of that. If we're going to have a serious conversation of the best TV episodes that Marvel has ever produced, again, if we're going to loop back in Marvel Entertainment, honestly, I think this is one of the best ones. Now, unfortunately, because this was so good, I I don't know how next week can be any better. And I don't know how we can possibly tie everything up, considering where we end this week, where I'm like, oh, how can we go back to where we were and all of this? And by the way, there's still a god that is to be released, and an Armageddon to be unleashed, and so much yet to come in what? Just, I don't know, one more episode? Yeah. If anything, that is kind of a con there, because I'm sorry, it's just hard to expect that it's going to be great. But the thing is, the show has been consistently like enjoyable in a way that the others haven't quite reached. Yeah, that's kind of my takeaway for this episode. So now that I've been talking for almost half an hour, which is par for the course, David, go ahead. I'd like to hear what you thought of this week's episode and everything. And you can feel free to address any of the long rants I went into before.
No, yeah, I really like this episode. For sure, the best one out of all of them. Oscar Isaac still fucking kills it in this show. But yeah, no, I'm really glad that we...
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally in the show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like to be finally just get answers to a lot of stuff that we've been asking. I should have known that we were going to get them in the 5th episode. I kept saying, like, every episode, yeah, I think we're going to get some answers, but I think we're going to get some answers. Like, every episode I kept saying that. I don't know why. But yeah.
It seems that's part of the formula, right? Like, the 5th episode is when they, like, tell us everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. In terms of how they're going to wrap it up, I feel like this one has a lot less stuff to end on than the other shows. Because
you know what? Yes, that's true. That's fair.
Because again, the thing that I kept praising about the show is that we're getting straight to the plot, you know.
Yeah.
And the other shows that kept going, I don't know what's gonna. I don't know what's gonna happen next.
Straight to the point, and straight to the story, and we're not meandering. Yeah. We're not going left and right and going in circles and circles. And in that aspect, sure, this episode count has helped with that, and they've been able to make the most out of it. That is true.
And so I feel like we should. I'm sure they're gonna leave on a cliffhanger probably, but other than that, I feel like we're gonna wrap up everything neatly. And then one thing you brought up before was how the comic book fans aren't really praising this show much, or just they're not happy about some of the changes that they made. I feel like they don't have to worry about that after this episode. We'll get to it when we get to it, but
okay.
Yeah, I feel like after this, I think they're gonna get what they wanted. We'll see.
All right. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the episode. David, where do we start off with this week? Where we left off last week.
Yeah, basically. Well, there was just this brief little flashback. I could tell right away that it was Oscar Isaac as a kid. You see this woman in front of him saying that it was all his fault, and then it just goes straight to Taware, right? To the goddess, or was it the therapy? I think it was
we went to the screaming immediately. So actually it was, we started off with Oscar Isaac as a kid, then we head off into the screaming, and from the screaming we then go back into the office.
Oh, okay, yeah. Then yeah,
because they're still trying to make us think like, wait, what's actually happening here?
Yeah. So yeah,
which in fairness was much better handled this week. The scenes in the office, as far as like making us like rethink where we are, but still, I wasn't buying it. I mean, I knew where we were and what we were dealing with the entire time.
Yeah, I knew that too. I had my own little theory, but yeah, I knew we weren't really like at a hospital or anything like that. But yeah, so yeah, he's in the office and basically he's just having a therapy session. He's talking to the doctor guy, Ethan Hawke's character. And So he's freaking out the whole time, saying like, "This isn't real. You're this guy. No, I'm not. This isn't a real place or anything like that." And then at some point, he starts just going crazier and crazier, and they inject him with something, and then we go straight back to Mark and Steven screaming still at the hippo goddess.
Right. And she's screaming too.
Also, the CGI on the hippo, we know where the money went.
Right?
Yeah.
I know, and this is, again, giving credit where credit is due. Like, it was a few weeks ago, we were really, like, trashing the show, honestly, with a couple of sequences, especially when they were outside, with how bad that looked, how fake it looked. Wow. Like, again, for TV, it's movie level, like, quality, like how it moved and everything. Yeah. It's amazing, actually. And it was not for a scene. It was throughout the entirety of the episode.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it looked better than most of the really good CGI the CW shows make. Most of the praise were King Shark and Gorilla Grodd. You know, those ones, every once in a while, they give some really good CGI. This one looked better than those. So, yeah, it was really... I actually saw a clip. It might have been from the episode before, but it was when you first see her and like the expressions she makes throughout that like little scene that you see her in. Like she goes from like confused, then she's focusing on them, and then she like gets, and then she kind of like gains like a little smile, and then she says hi. But like you see all that expression going on throughout her face, and I was like, dang, this is really good.
Yeah, in a way the Lion King never was, huh? Jon Favreau was the Lion King. Of course, I should clarify that atrocity that was, in my view, one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life. Because of how lifeless it was, because of how lifeless the animal characters were. Whereas you see this, which is, by the way, a very like realistic interpretation or animation, shall we say, of what a hippopotamus would be like, but of course a humanoid hippopotamus who is in fact an Egyptian god. And it's very convincing, and it's very good. And honestly, yeah, you're right. This is where the money went.
Yeah. So then she's just like, hi again. And she gets out these cards, and she's like, welcome to the Duat. Basically, they're the dimension where they're going to be their souls are going to be tested, and either they're going straight to the underworld or to heaven. I can't remember what exactly they said. The afterlife, that's what they said.
Well, an afterlife. And this is an interesting like discussion. So yeah, I think it's a lot of us were just kind of like wondering what the fuck happened at in the second half of last week's episode. Like, how did all of a sudden we come to the psychiatric ward, and then there's a hippopotamus, and it's like, okay, so especially that it took place after like Mark Steven being shot. So it's like, okay, well, what's all this? Why are we here? Well, the answers came pretty quickly, and that is, oh, yeah, he died. Pretty simple as that. And he went to, his soul, shall we say, went to one of the many afterlives that was seemingly confirmed here by, I forget, Tawadet or the Egyptian god here. She is, and again, this is it's just quite interesting here because this is the first like, or not the first, but it's like, well, yeah, it's the first indication that there are many afterlives in the MCU. The Egyptian god even mentioned the ancestral plane, which I completely forgot about because I don't think it amounted to anything really. As far as like anything, and I, of course, it's from a film that I hardly bother thinking about, if at all, and that was Black Panther, the ancestral plane. That's what. Remember the scene where T'Challa visits King T'Chaka. So, yeah, that's an interesting idea of all of this existing in some place. Yeah, man, just quite curious. I'm just like, as somebody like that's curious in an afterlife or in the afterlife, if that were to exist in our reality, I'm just like, okay, can I come and take a tour of this place? Because I just have a lot of questions as to how this operates and like who actually goes to the like Egyptian afterlife. Do you have to die in Egypt to go to the Egyptian afterlife? Or is it anybody who's Egyptian? These questions don't matter. Yeah. I'm just this interest in my mind. Like, okay.
I mean, the easy answer is just whatever they believe in the most. That's what they'll see. You know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, but the real answer is because this is what the story is, and this is why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how it is like in these situations. But it's interesting. While that is confirmed, Mark starts as soon as he hears like, oh, there's an afterlife, and then he begins to just, okay, well, you know what? Maybe Hera was right. I'm fucking crazy. And then he begins to have a meltdown, right? And then he just walks out, and then we get like the full reveal that they're in Duat, right? And they're sailing the sands of Duat on their way to the paradise, I believe is what the Egyptian god referred it to, some field. Again, Steven knows all of this because, of course, he's the Egyptian nerd and everything. So obviously, he's helping Mark, try to like place everything in the way that it should be. Yeah, a very strong opening to the episode. Like already, I'm just in to what's happening here. So, what comes next?
Yeah. So yeah, it's just we just keep getting brief explanations of where they're at and everything, some Egyptian mythology stuff. And then at one point, and then Tawaret, she at one point reaches inside both of their chests and like rips out their hearts, and she's going to weigh them with the truth feather thing. But it's unbalanced, keeps going back up and down and everything. So she's just like, okay, you guys got to figure this out before I make it to the temple, because if not, then you guys are just gonna be stuck here forever, stuck in the sands, basically. And then I can't remember when he goes back to the doctor. I know, or was that like way later on? Are we just going through the doors? No, yeah, I think. Yeah, they go back to like the hospital place, and they're just looking around, trying to see like, okay, how can we unbalance the scales here, and what's going on? And
right, so because like we see, what we're seeing is like the office doesn't come back into play for a bit here, but the psychiatric ward is, just to make a distinction here, that is being used. Again, the show loves reflections, but the psychiatric ward is being used as kind of like a conduit to access all of the memories for Mark and for Steven. And they begin to go ahead and do that. They kind of have to do that, right? Just like, because if they don't, and if the hearts aren't scaled, which by the way, it's the same problem that happened with him back in episode, what was it? Episode 1, right? Where Harrow approached Mark. No, it was Steven. And then he grabbed his hand, and he was, Harrow was betting on Amit to basically kill him. But then Harrow was like just stunned because Amit couldn't balance the scales and couldn't determine what to do with Steven, Mark. And so we see that come back into play here. And so how appropriate, of course, that we have to, obviously make it part of the plot. We need to know about them and how they came to be, because there's so much missing information from the other person. Otherwise, they're not going to, it won't end well, as you said, in that situation. So they begin. Oh, yes, David. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Steven and Mark, they're seeing, there's windows on the doors and just trying to see the memories. But Steven keeps, like, trying to get away from this. He doesn't want to explain anything. No, wait, I'm sorry. Mark is trying to. Yeah. He doesn't want to explain anything to Steven. My bad. And then at some point, they end up in the room, basically where we first saw him in the hospital. There's just a bunch of dead bodies. And then,
which, by the way, looked appropriately creepy.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. Mark, he's recognizing everyone. He's like, oh, New York, Dubai. It's like, he remembers where he killed all of these people. And Steven's just like, the fuck, dude? Why? All these people and everything is just like mercenary shit happens.
Plus, they were bad people. I mean, he calls them, there were murderers. There were
I forgot.
a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the people that he killed. Now, it's hard to say, like, those people that he killed there, because he talks about Conchu. Those are the people he killed while being with Conchu, or they also include the people he killed while he was a mercenary for hire.
I mean, it could be a mix.
Right.
I mean, he still could have done that before meeting Conchu. Who knows?
No, I think he did kill people before Conchu.
Yeah, but I mean, whether or not those were criminals or something before Conchu.
Right. That's a different question. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But we also see something else there. Steven figures out that the scales are slowing down, and he tells Mark, "This is what we have to do to basically save our asses." And while that happens, they notice in the corner of the room is a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, things begin to trend toward a darker direction. Mm-hmm. And it is pretty chilling the way that Steven frames this, but like Steven's already thinking the worst, not saying it, but thinking it. And then he basically says to Mark, "Why is there a child in a room full of people that you've killed?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't even think of that too. I was kind of laughing about it. It's like, dang, I didn't even think of that. Like, that is what he would think, huh? It's not like that.
Because of what comes to light later on. Mm-hmm. But at first, that's not how it is, at least the way you think it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And again, like, throughout the episode, you're going to see Steven just, like, run and run and run toward to finally get the truth that Mark has been keeping from in his entire existence. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, great scene. So, what comes next?
Mm-hmm. So, so Steven follows the kid. They go through the door, and it's just a little family dinner outside in their backyard, I guess, and everything. And he remembers that he had a brother. And so he's just taking in the scene and everything, and then the two of them, young Mark and his brother, decide to go out and go to a cave, I guess. It's a fun hideout for them. Steven is following them, and when they make it to the cave, it starts to rain. And one of the kids mentioned, it's like, Mom said not to go in when it's raining, but they're like, hey, come on, adventure, blah blah blah. So they go in. Steve follows, and then right away he notices, like, oh shoot, like, it's pouring out here, and he's calling out to the kids. I mean, he's not really there. It's just a memory. So kids are listening, but like, I think he could tell right away, like, what's going to happen. He's calling them out, trying to tell them to get out. But we can guess what's going to happen. And the next scene, basically, his little brother died when they went to the cave. It got flooded and everything. And the next scene is in the funeral. Mark is finally inside those memories, and basically throughout the memories we keep seeing that his mom blamed him for their son's death, but like really blamed him. I mean, it was just rough to watch those scenes, honestly, especially just because I liked it when that moment is just, I think Steven looked at his mom and was just like, what the fuck is wrong with you, basically. He didn't say that, but, at some point he did kind of go, what is wrong with her? Like, and everything. And so, yeah, they just, he's going more deeper into memories, and she's treating him worse and worse. And then I know at some point, oh man, they just go through a lot of stuff though. Like it's all kind of jumbled up in my head. Well, I mean, what did you think of that reveal? I guess.
Yeah, so I'll give you a chance to catch up on that. Honestly, look. Things were not necessarily trending in a positive direction as far as like what was about to be unearthed, and I guess, I don't know why I never put it together before that Mark and Steven would have the same mom. I don't know why I was thinking like, oh, maybe like his mom never existed. I don't know what it is, but anyway. He recognizes her. And I mean, I guess to me it's like, yes, it is pointed out while in the very, very beginning, when they're all together as family, that this is young Mark. But then there's like, who's this other kid? And then it's addressed, it's a brother. And I'm like, wait, not really thinking about what could come next and everything. It's just like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to add up to what we know so far. But as the boys are, asking permission to go into the, I guess the well, or whatever it was, wherever they went to, I don't know if you picked up on one of the kids, and it was Mark actually, that said, "Laters, Gators."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I kind of got like chills because at that point, like my heart sunk because it was like, wait a minute. This is about to get really, really fucking sad, isn't it? And I'm like, wait, so that's Mark saying "Laters, Gators." So in my mind, kind of like already piecing together like what's about to happen, I'm like, so did he create Steven to replace the brother that dies?
Mm.
That's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, it's made more clear it's a means to kind of cope with the whole situation, not necessarily seeing Steven as a replacement, although, considering the development between those two characters, they kind of do feel like brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of do, I guess, like feel like their own individual people, and take this into consideration because, again, I don't know anybody with DID, this condition of multiple, personality disorder, whatever you want to call it, but props on the show because look at this. Where in this entire situation, I should have addressed it at the very top of this whole breakdown. Steven is here in this like afterlife with souls. Steven was created by Mark. Steven became this whole personality, but clearly with Steven being in this afterlife, he's considered a soul. A person, which is far more than just another personality. And I just think that's pretty awesome because that's just like, that's still treating, even though Steven wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Mark, it's still treating both of them as individuals. And I appreciate that aspect of it. So at that point, it became pretty obvious the direction it was going to go. And yeah, that's kind of what happened. It's kind of got pretty dark. And then, of course, we jump into the scene where you mentioned with, I guess, the funeral, whatever you want to call it. And I mean, it kind of reminded me of the Hereditary situation, hilariously enough. Remember the film Hereditary where there's a kid that, it's kind of a similar situation, although in this case there's a lot of differences clearly, but I recall in Hereditary there was a pretty a memorable scene where the mom really lashed out at one of the kids because they ended up being kind of sort of responsible for the death of their younger sibling. And only in this case, though, it seems to be far worse because what is not suggested, what we see happen is the mom just decided to become this horrible person that would spend the rest of her days tormenting the one son she had left because she forever blamed him for the death of her younger son. And it's a pretty sad, fucked up situation because we see, a series of sequences mark through the years, and she never relented. Mm-hmm. She never gave him one inch. She even taunted him in years after that. And, I mean, that's pretty fucking monstrous. And in these sequences, we even see Mark as a younger man, probably like in his late teenage years, just leaving the family behind. And it's, I mean, everybody understands, like, the mom experienced so much heartbreak, but that just wasn't fun to see. And it's just sad. And it's even sadder still that, not to put him equally at fault, because of course he didn't, and he was there, he tried to be there for Mark, but it's pretty amazing how Mark's dad allowed the mom to remain in Mark's life. Mm-hmm. And at that home. Like, how would you, just how could that work with that whole thing happening? So, yeah, it's, that's kind of where it cuts off, because Mark doesn't want to go any further. And I believe this is the point that we transfer over to the night Mark died. Or became one with the moon, shall we say. I don't know if that's even a phrase. I just made that up. Anyway, we go into the scene now. Mark is basically dying in the tomb. Is it a tomb? Is it a...
I think just a temple.
A shrine? Okay, Khonshu, a temple, sure. Yeah. A temple. Khonshu's temple. There, we'll say it. And Khonshu calls to him. Basically sees an opportunity there. Kind of interesting, of course. It kind of reminds you that, Khonshu is kind of a dick at heart. And kind of like flaunted how curious he was at his fractured mental state. Like, this could be fun. Mm-hmm. Want to come? Okay, I mean, seriously, that's kind of how it came off of. But, offered him the chance to live, become, as he says, his Moon Knight. Wonderful scene. We see how it happens. Personally, I would have liked a little bit more, because, of course, Mark explains to Layla that this other guy that he was working for was the perpetrator of all of this, and that ultimately it ended up with a confrontation that left Mark in a state where he was about to die. I would have loved to have seen that, to just give a little bit meat on those bones. Of course, that's a territory we're not going to go into because, of course, it's Disney Plus. I mean, honestly, let's be real with that. On top of the fact that when you saw all those people dead on the floor, I'm sorry, but remember a few episodes back, they were hyping it up with really dark, execution style murders, and you see it first of all, again, there's no blood anywhere. There's just people, they might as well be sleeping or napping on the floor. Yeah. So it's just okay, big deal, right? Everything else, the episode's moving. We're going to better places. It's fine. I can overlook it. I want to comment well, maybe we could have made more of this situation. Well, made more of this sequence if we cared to spend more time on it, but we don't. We just didn't want to.
If they say that it's the most violent show, I want to see the violence. Okay, it's just come on.
I mean, you're right, man.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about it like, "Hey, this is our most violent series we've done so far."
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you say so, let's see.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's not, and I'm like, well, what happened? You certainly can't mean this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the stuff last week, sure. Okay, I can see it. But here it's like, well, okay. You talked about these dark murders, these executions, but we don't want to see it. Oh, okay. I get you. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah, so basically, we finally get the reveal of how he met Khonshu and everything, and then we're back at the hospital. And basically, Steven just like assigning blame to Mark about what happened to those people in that site. And he says the one word that Mark just hates, and he says it's all your fault. You know, those people are dead. It's like, it's all your fault. And that's when he starts freaking out. And it's just like, no. And starts hitting himself in the head. And then we get back to the doctor, to the office and everything.
Dr. Harrow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, basically everything that we just saw that's in the office, that was basically Mark talking it out to the doctor, saying like, oh, hey, I'm glad you finally opened up and everything. It's like, this is great progress. Which I actually kind of like that. I was just like, oh, hey, cool. It's like we're catching up with him and everything. And it is good for him to process all this with Steven or the doctor and everything. Just because you see that the scale is starting to balance the more he goes into these memories and all that.
Like it's time for Mark to deal with this shit, and it's time for Steven to know so that he can deal with this shit. Because as we go through the episode, there's some pretty hard truth bombs that are really going to devastate Steven, and he should know as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately what's where that all is going to lead here.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we from here? So, by the way, in case I don't mention it later on in the episode, it's hilarious how Ethan Hawke is pretty fucking good. Not just as Harrow, but this version of Harrow as well.
Yeah, I really liked it. It was just like, I genuinely believed he cared about Mark.
Seriously?
In that moment. He's genuinely trying to take care of him. So and
you gotta love the fact that it's jumping from like location to location, or I guess jumping from like certain realities to another, and yet we're still moving. And like every little bit and piece here is like, moving along with what comes next.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, of course, this therapy session is, aimed to be that. And then, of course, I believe it ends with Mark trying to kill him. And then we end up going back to...
No, I don't think he tried to kill him. No. That was in the first time. When the first time
he
tried to kill him.
You're right.
And this one, though, like, because of everything he went through, he's actually trying to talk to him and everything. Trying to process it.
Yes.
And what brought him back was... I think it might have been Tawaret or Steven. Basically, they go out of the hospital, back on the boat, and we see all these, like, I guess, souls coming down. And basically we find out that Harrow let go of Amut and is now doing what he was doing, basically.
So the implication is, like, Amet has been unleashed.
Amet has been unleashed, and now they have to hopefully get back to their world and everything. And they had a good plan going on, basically. Tawaret talks to Layla, tell her, like, get his body and everything. And then, but they have to balance out the skills first in order for them to go back at all. And so, yeah,
a lot. By the way, that's a lot. I think I had to rewind the scene because like they threw a lot out there in like, I don't know, 30 seconds or 60 seconds of like, okay, this is happening now. Can we get Layla to talk to Khonshu? I don't quite understand how they can do that. I mean, well, they're Egyptian gods, so I guess like she would like know, right?
Mm-hmm.
To what it? By the way, this wouldn't be the same god that helped Mark in like episode 3, would it?
No, that was someone else. I can't remember her name, but she said it was like something about goddess of music or something. Or
okay,
yeah,
just making sure.
Yeah, this is
just
a different goddess.
Okay, just to clarify that. So yeah, that's a lot that happens here. So, all right, that's the thing that's happening. But again, they have to figure out their solve first, and so they end up going where?
They go back and they end up going to the door, his bedroom. Basically, that was the one place Mark didn't.
Oh yeah,
want Steven to go through, and it was because his mom was yelling at him through the door and everything, and he starts freaking out. It's just kind of like saying that's not his mom, that's not his mom. And then finally we see the kid, which good job on the kid, replicated perfectly. He did the thing from switching from Mark to Steven, and basically we find out he made up Steven. I don't know if that was the first time he made it up or just one of the times.
Well, again, what's implied, right? Stephen Grant, it was a character that both he and his brother liked in a movie. Part of the movie that we saw last week in the episode. So it's a persona that clearly meant a lot to him. It's one that reminded him of his lost brother. And in a moment, I don't know if you want to call it a mental break, but it was just obviously under extreme duress. Stephen was born. In that moment, it seemed like. I think that was the first moment that happened, I want to say. And we see that in most ways, well, in the way, that's ultimately why Mark created him, was to...
It was basically as a coping mechanism for what
it was a
mom
coping mechanism.
was doing
of course.
To him.
It wasn't just... I mean, we were under the impression it was just like years and years of like verbal abuse. No, it wasn't just that. Because what happens thereafter is even sadder. So it wasn't just years of like verbal abuse. It was years of physical abuse. And creating Steven as it was just his way to cope with all of it. And it was Mark's wish that Steven just never be around for the dark sides that would come out. And then Steven did get a little offended, though, when the way that Mark said, this is the point of you, to not see these things. Which there then explains why Mark this entire time, aside from it just being extremely painful to talk about and think about, this ultimately explains why he's never been straight up with Steven. Just at all. And then it comes to a point where he blurts out something significant. And that is his mom has been dead. And Steven just can't and won't deal with any of that. And so, I believe, David, at this point, Steven is the one that goes back into Harrow's office. And what happens here? And then the water in his face?
He throws water at the doctor's face. And he's just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He's like wiping it off and everything. But the doctor's like, hey, it's good to see you, Steven. He's like, I thought I was never going to see you again. Then Steven starts freaking out because he realizes it's Harrow. But then he starts trying to calm him down and everything. And then I don't know how it was brought up, but he brought up his mom, basically saying like, "Oh, you're trying to make me."
Yeah,
think,
because
like,
it was brought up because like he explained to Steven that he checked himself here into this facility after the passing of his mom, and that's ultimately what pissed off Steven, because what do you mean? She's not dead. Stop saying that.
Mm-hmm. And then he's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. That was my mistake. We'll call her. It's fine. Well, we got her number on file. It's fine. And like he's pressing some numbers and everything, going from one phone line to the next. But I think as he's going on, Steven's realizing like she's not gonna be there. And then the doctor points the phone at him. It's like, here, talk to her. And it's just dead on the other side. Nothing there. And Steven realizes like, yeah, she's been dead this whole time. Which that sucks, honestly. I felt so bad for Steven, especially.
Yeah, that was just hard to watch. Mm-hmm. But great moment by Oscar Isaac. I mean, seriously.
Oh, this whole episode, he was so good.
Seriously.
Oh my god. Mm. And so that led him back to the duat and everything. And then I can't remember what happens next. Was it with his mom at the funeral? Like, does it just cut there? I can't remember how they got there.
Yeah, they basically go exactly to the scene that they saw earlier. You know, earlier out in the episode, we saw that both Steven and Mark were seeing a particular window where Mark was drinking out of a flask, but didn't necessarily know what it was from. So we go directly to that moment where Mark is outside of, you know, the funeral happening, and then this pretty like intimate moment happens where his father notices him outside and across the street and kind of beckons him to come in. And then, you know, of course, Mark refuses to and walks away. And another wonderful moment where it's like he is resisting the urge to feel sad over the death of someone who was so horrible to him, but still breaks emotionally because at the end of the day, it was still his mom and he loved her. It's
also,
just, wow.
You mentioned it before, but I mean, I'll say it. I hate the dad. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
God. I mean, I don't know if he knew or not what was happening. I'd be surprised if he didn't know, honestly. But just, I would have wished he was a bit more understanding for Mark in the situation and everything.
Understanding my ass. I wish he was a bit more, I don't know, supportive.
Yeah, that too. I mean,
of him this entirety of his existence. I mean, of course, understanding the. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to show up at this, you know, woman's funeral. But yeah, it's a whole situation. Anyway, we see Steven see this, and we see Steven see Mark in the most emotional moment I don't think we've ever seen him be in. And then, of course, that's where he sees Mark become Steven again. Steven's lost, and then Steven's on the phone with his mom, thinking that she's still alive. And of course, you said that was going to come back around. And it came back around in a big way. It was said that this passing was pretty recent, and this is basically, I think Mark says, why it was that Steven and Mark have been like intercutting back and forth now. This is ultimately what triggered all of it, and why Steven all of a sudden became aware of Mark and Moon Knight and all the other stuff. So yeah, I don't know what there is to say other than that's, I mean, pretty good acting, pretty good writing, and wow, that's just sad.
I mean, there's what happened? Oh, basically in that moment though, it was too late now. I think they didn't tip the scales or balance the scales in time, and they were being attacked in the boat by sand people.
I was gonna. I was thinking the exact same shit. I mean, that's what they literally are. Sand people.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doomed souls basically, but they come out of the sand, so they're sand people. You know.
And so they're trying to fight him off. Mark is fighting them off. Steven is steering the boat, trying to keep them off balance. But it becomes too much for Mark, and then Steven, he gets the courage again. Some of these episodes, he just keeps getting more and more courage. Finally, he's like, I'm capable of this. Like, he can be like Mark.
I'm just as capable as you are.
Mm-hmm. And so he starts
That's what he says.
Fighting those sand people. He kills a few and everything. But then at some point, Mark gets captured again. Well, Mark, he's like surprised at Steven, like, holy shit, you did it. But that distracted him. And so he gets captured again by another sand person. And then Steven runs up to him, pushes the sand person off him, and he falls off the boat. He couldn't make it back in time, and he turns to sand himself and breaks apart. I mentioned earlier that people who were fans of the comics are mad about this adaptation, that it's not really faithful to the comics. I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned in an episode, I think it might have been the episode before, that I said, we're seeing the beginnings of his adventure. Let's see where it goes, like we might get to where he is in the comics. I think this is the moment. I think Steven is dead. He's not going to come back. And so that whole, like, what is it, Mr. Knight costume is going to go to, I don't know, I get either Jake, or maybe somehow he's just going to make up a new personality, another Steven, and that's going to be like the one in the comics. Because I think in the comics he has like multiple personalities. I don't know. But
is that what you want? What do you think here?
I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I think honestly, that would be really cool if they just kill off Steven permanently. I would be sad, obviously. Like, I love Steven. I love the relationship between him and Layla. But I don't know. I think that'd be really cool.
Well,
it's interesting.
It was a great. It was interesting. Sure, the direction they could go into. This was pretty good sacrifice play. But here's the thing, though. That tipped the scale. Not that basically balanced the scales, and we end off with Mark basically in Egyptian heaven, paradise, whatever it is, and then the episode ends. Yeah, I don't know how all this wraps up next week, but I honestly cannot believe that this is the end of Steven. And there's that. That's it. Because he's been such a big part of the show. He's such a likable element of the show. I mean, this just reminds me of the same way that they killed off Mobius. Quote unquote, killed off Mobius in Loki. Only for him to, rematerialize in whatever that planet was at the end of time. So I'm not of the mind that Steven is gone from the show, considering how much ground we broke between the two of them here. Also, I don't want that to be the case. I want this character to come back and be a part of the series and be a part of this finale. He's been such a big part of the show, and to think that he'll just be like, this is it, this is where it ends. It's pretty fucked up, considering that's not an all ending Steven deserves. I mean, I know there's something to be said for the fact that, well, regardless of whether he deserves it or not, it was a sacrifice. But I mean, look at what the episode was saying. The only way for Mark to move forward is to let go of Steven, which I don't know if that's a positive message, because Steven's been such a big help for Mark. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what they were trying to say with that.
I mean, it's not really just letting go of Steven. I mean, it's letting go of everything, letting go of his
right.
mom,
Well, the whole baggage,
the whole
and everything.
baggage of it. I think that would be kind of interesting. He keeps making more and more personalities that'll maybe help him out. I don't know. Maybe that can be the show. Like, it can be a new personality coming up every season or something. I don't know. And then he has to learn either to cope with them or cope with whatever reason that he manifested them. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying too. Like I said, I love Steven. He was great in the show, but I don't know. I find it really interesting to kind of like just kill off a personality of his and make that permanent.
Well, I guess we'll see where it's all going to end up. I mean, I feel like if we're talking about, we're already at the end of this episode review. What's going to happen next week? Somehow Mark comes back, Khonshu comes back, and they stop Harrow. Okay, I mean, that seems like a pretty safe bet that's going to happen. Also, there's Layla, by the way, to wrap up in all of this, so... Yeah, it's going to be interesting. What are your, what concerns do you have about how they handle the finale here?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's just, there's really not much that, there's really not a lot for them to, what's the word? End stuff. I don't know.
There's not as many storylines to handle.
Yeah. That's exactly it. There's not a lot of storylines in this. I can definitely picture a way for them to kind of just get everything together. I mean, obviously the whole Amut thing is happening. I'm sure the other gods will notice it and they're like, "Oh shit, we fucked up," and maybe they'll release Khonshu, and then that's how Mark gets his powers back. I don't know. I wouldn't mind if Layla becomes the avatar of a god. That'd be kind of cool. And then yeah, I mean, just the only big thing I can think of is just they gotta stop Amit and Harrow. I think that can lead to a pretty big battle. I hope the CGI they put money on that too.
But I also hope it's not just battle.
Yeah.
I want resolution.
Mm-hmm.
I want the characters, of course, at the end of the day to be the most important part of this and not just an excuse to just be one long action set piece, which, to be fair, is what just about all the finales have been. Just a big action set piece.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I would not want to happen. That doesn't mean I don't want action. Of course there should be action. Of course there should be a climax. But it shouldn't be the entire episode devoted to that. Because, a lot of the big moments end up getting like swept under the rug when you dedicate the entire finale to just an action set piece. So, anyway, that's that. All right, David, I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us for this, recap of Moon Knight. And already... we're about to watch the finale of Moon Knight. Join us next week for our discussion here on Red Spotlight. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.